It all came to light by accident, as such things often do. I had just come home from work, feeling sick, and was lying on the couch in the family room with my eyes closed. I had parked my car in the garage. It was a cool day, so I made sure to close the garage door behind me. Janice didn't know I was home when she pulled into the driveway, since she had left her car outside. She and her sister Carla came in through the front door and went straight to the kitchen. The couch was facing away from the entryway, so they couldn't see me lying there. I was about to get up and announce my presence, but as soon as I lifted my head, I got so nauseous I had to fall back onto the couch until the feeling passed. I barely heard their conversation from the kitchen, but I gathered that Janice had stopped by the house on her way to drop Carla off. She wanted to show her a new dress she'd bought for their annual outing to Chicago. Every year, for the last 4 years, Janice and Carla took a weekend trip from our home in Indianapolis to Chicago for a show and some art. Bob, my brother-in-law, and I stayed home to watch the kids while they were gone. It was their way of getting a break after working hard all year, and we could afford to let them enjoy some time away. By the way, Janice's name is Janice and mine is Jim. We have 2 kids, Ryan, who's 5, and Sean, who's 2. We've been married for 7 years. I'm a middle manager at a large logistics company, and we live comfortably on my salary. Janice is very active and has worked hard to maintain her figure after having the kids. We have a good, active sex life and enjoy each other's company. I thought we were the perfect couple with the perfect marriage. Carla lives just a few blocks away, and we do most things together, both as families and as friends. She's a younger version of Janice, and the 2 of them are almost inseparable. Carla has a daughter, Melissa, who's 3. As I lay there, still waiting for the nausea to pass, I could hear Carla exclaiming over the dress Janice had shown her. "My gosh, that's a sexy dress. Has Jim seen it? Does he know you're taking it on the trip?" "No, if he saw it, he might get suspicious. So don't say anything, okay? Randy is really going to get a charge out of it." Who the hell is Randy? I thought to myself. I thought my nausea had passed, but I stayed lying down, hoping the feeling would fully subside. Then I heard Janice ask, "Are you going to take something for Mark?" "Who the hell is Mark?" I wondered again. Carla replied, "I've got some special lingerie I've kept hidden from Bob that will really turn him on. I've got special lingerie, too, that Jim hasn't seen. That should really fire Randy up." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. My stomach was churning as I tried to process what I was hearing. They were having affairs, and it sounded like they were pretty familiar with these men. Who were they, and how long had this been going on? My mind was already spinning when Janice's next words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Are you going to keep taking your birth control pills this year?" "Yeah, I only wanted 1 child from Randy. It's lucky that he and Jim look so much alike. Even Jim's mom thinks Sean is the spitting image of Jim." I felt like I had been kicked in the gut, and my nausea hit me like a sledgehammer. I struggled to hold myself together. I wanted to puke, and bile was rising up my throat. Thankfully, at that moment, they decided to leave so Janice could drop Carla off. I quickly got up from the couch and headed to the bathroom as they were closing the front door. I barely made it to the toilet in time. I stuck my head in and let it all go. Thankfully, the lid was up. I must have thrown up everything, but even when I was done, I still had the dry heaves. It took me a second to realize I needed proof of any infidelity, and I needed to get out of the house before Janice came back. I sprayed air freshener in the bathroom, grabbed my jacket, and ran into the garage. I opened the garage door and drove off, closing it behind me. I went to a nearby mall parking lot and sat in my car, trying to think through my next steps. I thought about calling Bob and telling him everything I'd heard, but my mind was still in denial. Janice couldn't be unfaithful to me. Sean couldn't possibly not be my son. My anger was growing as I thought about the affair with some guy named Randy. What was I supposed to tell Bob about Carla and Mark? I needed legal advice, fast, to figure out what my options were if this turned into what I feared. The girls were leaving for their outing in 4 days, and I had a lot to do before then. I grabbed my cell phone and called my friend, golfing buddy, and high school pal, Jerry Matthews, asking if I could see him as soon as possible. His secretary, Helen, could tell from my voice that something was wrong. She asked if I could be in his office in 15 minutes. I agreed, hung up, and drove quickly to his office. When I walked in, Helen took one look at me and said, "Jim, you look awful." "I've just received some bad news, Helen. I think I'm coming down with something," I replied, trying to keep it together. "Is he available now?" "Go right in," she said, wringing her hands as she glanced at me. I rushed past her, knocked once, and entered Jerry's office. He stood up when he saw me and waved me to a chair in front of his desk. "Good God, Jim, what's going on? You look terrible." "Jerry, I've just been hit with a double whammy. One I think I'll recover from. The other, I'm not so sure about." "Tell me about it," he said, sitting down. "First, I should warn you, I think I'm coming down with something. And second, I think I've got a problem with Janice. I need some advice." "Okay, the first shouldn't be a problem. I've had a flu shot. But the second, Janice? That's inconceivable. I've known you both since you were married. You've always been the perfect couple. Tell me what's going on." I explained everything I had overheard that afternoon. I can't believe Janice or Carla would do something like that. If Janice deliberately conceived a child by another man, it's mind-blowing. What do you think I should do? Divorce her? Or try to get past her infidelity and the possibility that Sean might not be mine? "I don't know how you could forgive her," Jerry said. "Look, I don't handle divorce cases, but I can put you in touch with a good lawyer who can walk you through it all, if that's what you want. You're going to need more than just what you overheard proof, especially regarding Sean's paternity. Do you want me to call him and set up an appointment?" "Yes, please," I said, the weight of it all hitting me suddenly. Jerry looked at me with sympathy as he buzzed Helen. "Helen, will you get Sam Ridley on the phone?" I heard Helen exclaim, "Oh God, no?" But Jerry was quick to connect the call. "Sam, it's Jerry. Do you have time to talk to a good friend of mine about a problem he's having?" There was a pause while Jerry listened. Then he turned to me. "How about tomorrow at 9 o'clock in Sam's office? It's getting late now." "Okay, I'll be there," I nodded. "I'd suggest you go home now and try to act normal. Don't let Janice know anything's wrong. This may not turn out the way you think, and you don't want to do anything irreversible to your marriage." "You're right," I said. "I've got to control myself until I'm sure. Thanks, Jerry." We stood, and Jerry grasped my hand. "I'm so sorry about all this, Jim. You and Janice have always been my dearest friends. I've known you both for a long time. Your grief is mine. Thanks again, Jerry. I'll let you know what happens." As I walked out, Helen gave me a sad look. "I'm so sorry, Jim." "Thanks, Helen," I replied. When I got home that evening, it was around my usual time, so Janice didn't suspect anything was off. But as soon as I walked in, she commented, "Jim, honey, you look terrible. Are you feeling okay?" I gritted my teeth. I wanted to lash out at her, to make her feel the pain I was going through, but I held myself in check. Instead, I forced a smile and said, "I think I'm coming down with something." Then, with a little more bite, I added, "I hope I'm better in a few days, so you can still go on your trip." For a moment, I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, you probably just have a touch of the flu. You should be better by Friday." "I hope so. Right now, I just want to lie down. Can I take a rain check on dinner?" "Sure, honey. Go get into your pajamas and rest. Why didn't you leave work earlier? I tried, but I had too many things going on at work. I lied. Take a couple of aspirin, and I'll check on you later. The kids had their daycare today. Carla and I went shopping as usual. I saw a cute pair of sandals, but they didn't have my size, so I didn't buy anything. My mind was numb with sickness and grief as I stumbled upstairs to our bedroom. I didn't want to be near the kids, so I left them playing in the family room. Couldn't even look at Sean. My God. What if he wasn't my son? What would I do? I remembered that 3 years ago, before Janice had gone on one of their trips, she had insisted we not have sex the week before or after the event. She claimed it was because she didn't want to be pregnant during the trip. But now, everything felt like a lie. She had an infection, and she deliberately slept with him to have his child. It was incredibly hard to accept the magnitude of her betrayal. I woke up the next morning feeling somewhat better, thinking it was just a 24-hour flu. But the sudden recollection of what I'd overheard the day before left me feeling depressed. I looked at Janice, sleeping next to me. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. It was hard to imagine her with another man, but I knew I had to prepare myself for that possibility. I went into the bathroom, took a shower, and dressed for work. After a cup of coffee, I left the house before Janice came downstairs. I heard her upstairs with the kids. They always managed to get up early, but I couldn't face them yet. I stopped at Denny's for breakfast and then headed into work early, trying to focus on the job. Around 8:30, I told my boss I'd be taking a couple of hours of personal time that morning. He acknowledged it with a nod and asked, "How are you feeling this morning? You didn't look too good when you left early yesterday." "I'll be fine, Jack. It may take some time to get over it," I replied. He was talking about my sickness, but my mind was on Janice. At 9 o'clock, I arrived at Sam's office. His secretary escorted me in and closed the door as she left. Sam had a set of informal chairs arranged around a low table. He waved me over to one of the chairs and took the one across from me. "In this business," he said, "I find this setup more conducive for my clients. Divorce is very emotional and requires a lot of personal involvement. I have some decaf coffee if you're interested. Now, why don't you tell me what's going on?" I poured myself a cup and began to explain my situation. When I finished, Sam thought for a moment and asked, "Do you love your wife?" I thought I did. I thought I loved her more than life itself. But when I think about what she might have done to me, I get cold and empty inside. Angry. It's like she's someone I don't know anymore. A stranger. I keep hoping this is just a bad dream and that I'll wake up and everything will be okay. But I have to think about the kids. They're my greatest concern. Well, I think the first thing we need to do is find out if she's actually committing adultery. If what you heard is true, you can decide whether to proceed with a divorce. We'll need to hire an investigator to check on what your wife is doing in Chicago this weekend. This could get a little expensive, so I'd suggest involving your brother-in-law to share the costs. If it's true, we can pretty much kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Then, I think we should get DNA tests to verify the paternity of your children. I'd suggest your brother-in-law do the same. You can talk to him about it when you see him. We'll set up another meeting with him, but I don't want to involve Bob until after the trip. I don't want to get Bob involved before they go. Right now, I'm having trouble relating to Janice the way I normally would. I could attribute my behavior to the flu, but if I tell Bob and he starts acting weird around Carla, they might suspect something. Okay, that makes sense. Can you give me your wife's itinerary so I can provide it to the investigator? The name of the hotel and room number would be helpful, if she has a special one reserved. I think they do reserve the same room every year. I'll get that for you along with the itinerary. They fly and use taxis or shuttles when they get there. That makes it easier for us to track them. Next, we need to secure your finances. Do you understand what I mean by that? I think I do. I need to protect my assets. Exactly. We have to assume what you heard is true. Wherever your wife has access to joint accounts or credit cards, you'll need to consider changing the beneficiaries on your insurance policies to your children. It's known to happen that when a spouse becomes aware of an impending breakup, they'll run and clean out all accounts. You can always change it back if everything turns out to be fine. You'll also want to be generous with your joint checking account so she can live until she finds a job or a new place. I'll leave that decision to you, but you should discuss it with your brother-in-law when you talk to him. When we sit down to negotiate a divorce settlement, we'll aim for an equitable split of both your assets. I'll get started on that today, but I hope for your sake that this turns out to be a false alarm. If everything you heard is true, you should have no trouble gaining custody of your older son. Thanks, Sam. I'll get that itinerary to you by tomorrow. After leaving Sam's office, I went straight to the bank. I closed all our joint savings and CD accounts, transferring the funds into an account under my name only. I left $111,000 in our joint checking account and moved the rest into my savings. Next, I contacted my stockbroker and moved our investments into my own account. He was concerned, but I didn't explain anything to him. I wanted to cancel our credit cards, but I was worried that if a charge was refused while they were in Chicago, it might alert them. So I decided to wait until I heard from the investigator. Then I went back to the office, trying to focus on work. I couldn't stomach lunch. I wasn't sure if it was leftover flu symptoms or the images in my mind of my wife with another man. My anger and stress were mounting, but I had to keep myself under control. When I got home that evening, I continued pretending to be sick. Janice seemed concerned. Why didn't you stay home today? You shouldn't have gone to work. I didn't want to pass it to you or the kids. If you got it, you might not be able to go on your trip with Carla this weekend, I said, watching for her reaction. You're probably right. Maybe you should sleep in the spare room tonight, or at least until you feel better, she suggested. I was making sure her plans with her lover wouldn't be interrupted. It was going to be hard to keep pretending I didn't know what was going on. For the next few days, I managed to get some dinner down. Instead of watching TV, I went to the computer to check my email. While I was at it, I decided to check her emails. But I found that she'd changed her password. I played around a little and finally cracked it. Her new password? Sean's name and birth date. When I opened the inbox, I hit the jackpot. A series of emails from someone using the username RNM. I copied them to a new file to print later. I read a few to confirm what I feared. The proof of her infidelity was right there. They had been communicating to arrange their weekend plans. They had most of their plans made before, so I didn't expect to learn much more. I figured tapping the phone line wouldn't add much at this point. These emails gave me everything I needed. Now I just had to wait. The next day, I faxed the itinerary to Sam and tried to continue working as normal. But it was hard. My boss and secretary knew something was wrong but didn't press me. They just asked if I was still sick. I told them it was lingering and kept working. I printed off Janice's emails from RNM after reading them and mailed the copies to Sam. I now knew they'd been meeting during this annual trip for 4 years. Randy and Mark had rooms booked together, and Janice and Carla stayed in adjoining rooms, so the lovers could share one room and be intimate. They always reserved the same rooms each year, so I passed on the room numbers to Sam. I also learned that Randy and Mark were married and lived in Milwaukee. They attended the Chicago Boat Show every year at the same time, leaving their wives behind to look after the kids. Finally, it was Friday. Janice and Carla would be heading to the airport around noon and leaving Carla's car there until Sunday. That morning, I got up and went downstairs. Janice was making coffee and cooking a bacon and egg breakfast. Normally, I had cereal, so this felt special. I want to give you a good breakfast before I go. I'm worried about you. You haven't been eating well all week. That flu must really be lingering. I'm sorry we haven't been intimate this week, and I appreciate you trying to protect me and the kids. When I get back Sunday, you should be feeling better, and I'll show you my appreciation then, Janice said. Thanks. I'd be looking forward to it, I replied, forcing a smile and giving her a chaste kiss on the cheek. She seemed pleased. Don't forget, you need to be home by noon so you can start your babysitting duties. We'll need to get to the airport. I haven't forgotten, I muttered, forgetting momentarily that I needed to stay in control. The pressure of what she planned to do this weekend was getting to me. What's the matter, Jim? Are you mad at me for some reason? No, I replied, trying to clear my throat. Just some phlegm. I smiled innocently. She looked at me oddly for a moment, but I kept my face relaxed, and she resumed her chatter. After breakfast, I put on my suit jacket, grabbed my briefcase, and headed for the garage. Aren't you going to kiss me goodbye? Janice asked. Before you go, she said, looking at me strangely again. I knew I had to go all out here or she would suspect something. So, I dropped my briefcase, took her in my arms, and kissed her on the lips. My stomach churned with nausea, but I suppressed it, trying to convince her of my undying love and faithfulness. It must have worked, because when I stepped away, she said, "Wow, honey, maybe you want to stay home this morning and we'll have your Sunday sex today." I'd like that, dear, but if I'm going to take a half day off, I need to get to work, I replied, giving her another kiss on the cheek as I grabbed my briefcase again and headed for the garage. She was all smiles as I left, so I hoped she wasn't suspicious anymore. If she wanted to act like the loving wife, I could act the loving husband for a little longer. I was home by noon, and Janice had lunch ready for me. I ate and chatted with her while she gathered her bags at the door. Well, I hope you girls are going to behave yourselves, I said, trying to keep things light. We always do, honey, but there are always some cute guys to look at, she teased. As long as it's just looking, I replied. But then, with a more serious tone, I added, you know it would kill me if you ever decided to play around. I don't think I could survive it. Janice looked shocked for a moment but quickly recovered, smiling. You know I've always been faithful to you, Jim, and I will never change. I know, but you're a beautiful woman, and I know you get hit on occasionally. I know that a stay-at-home mom gets spared sometimes, but I let my voice trail off, watching her face grow pale. She hugged me, and just as Carla honked from outside, announcing her arrival, Janice gave me a quick kiss on the lips before turning away. I thought I saw a tear in her eye. I picked up her bags and followed her out to Carla's car. Minutes later, I watched as their car disappeared down the street, waving goodbye, maybe for the last time. After feeding the kids, I called Bob and told him I was coming over for a minute. He said he'd be there, so I gathered Ryan and Sean and drove the few blocks to his house, taking a copy of Janice's emails with me. When I arrived, Bob was finishing up feeding Melissa and greeted us with a big smile. "Hi, you guys," he said. "Come into the family room, and we'll watch a video." "I'm not going to stay long, Bob. We need to talk," I said, guiding the kids to the family room to play. Bob looked at me quizzically and ushered the kids in. "What's up? What do you have there?" he asked, pointing to the packet of emails I was holding. "These are for you to read," I told him as we sat down at the kitchen table. "But first, I've got something really bad to tell you, so try to remain calm." "What's the matter? Are you terminal or something?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "No, I wish it were," I replied. "But it could be terminal for our marriages." Bob suddenly turned pale and fell silent as I explained the conversation I overheard between our wives and handed him the emails. His eyes widened as he read them, and he kept repeating, "Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!" I could tell how devastating it was for him. He loved Janice just as much as I loved Janice. When he finished reading, he put his head down on the table and cried. After that, I told him about Sam, the Chicago investigator, and what I had done so far regarding our finances. I explained that I was on my way to a clinic in town to have DNA samples taken from the kids and me for paternity testing. "Do you want to come with me?" I asked. Bob was shocked. The thought that Melissa might not be his daughter hadn't hit him until that moment. He jumped up and ran into the bathroom, and I heard him vomiting and dry heaving, the same reaction I'd had several days ago, though mine had been mixed with the flu. Now I understood why his reaction was so intense. Once he calmed down, he agreed to come with us. He didn't look well at all, but we gathered the kids and headed for the clinic. The staff there was professional, and they only needed to use swabs to collect saliva samples from each of us. I also asked them to do blood tests on the kids and me to have a record of our blood types. They told us they would send the results by next Wednesday. After leaving the clinic, we went to Bob's bank, where he made the necessary changes to his accounts. He decided he would contact his broker and insurance agent from his phone once he got home. On the drive back, I asked if he wanted to come to our house to stay the weekend, but I told him I didn't think he should be around just yet. Bob thought for a moment and then said, "Okay," but asked if we could stop at his house to pick up a few things for the weekend. After doing that, we drove back to my house. The kids were completely oblivious to what was going on, and for that I was thankful. Their lives would soon be turned upside down, and I wanted to keep them unaware for as long as possible. Bob and I sat in the kitchen discussing our next steps. After years of betrayal, we agreed that we'd lay low until the wives returned. We would wait for the investigator's report and the results of the DNA tests before making any decisions. We both knew, though, that to avoid suspicion, we'd have to have some kind of intimate interaction with our wives. The idea made me uneasy, and I wasn't sure I'd even be able to respond to Janice, much less get an erection. Bob confessed he might face the same problem but mentioned he had some Viagra samples from a few months ago that could help. I told him I'd pick some up when I dropped him and Melissa off on Sunday. We spent a quiet weekend together. Jen and Carla called each evening, and we acted like everything was fine. They seemed pleased that Bob, the kids, and I were spending the weekend together. Jen even said it would be great to plan this for next year, but I couldn't bring myself to think about that. Felt like there wouldn't be a next year. On Sunday afternoon, before they returned, I took Bob and Melissa home. I picked up the Viagra doses and headed back home, waiting for Janice's arrival. Around 4 p.m., I heard a honk from out front. I went out to help Janice with her luggage. She was all smiles, clearly happy to see me. I figured if she could act happy, I could do the same, so I put on a similar act. The kids were thrilled to see their mom, and she spent some time with them while I took her bags into our bedroom and emptied them. I noticed a bag of dirty laundry, mostly lingerie. Holding my breath, I checked the crotch of 2 pairs of panties, but found no obvious sign of semen. I didn't think much of it. If she had removed them for sex after returning to her room, they might not have been put back on. I exhaled softly and rejoined my family. Later, we went out for dinner. After the kids were in bed, Janice came to me in the family room and took my hand, leading me to our bedroom. "Why don't you get undressed?" she asked, giving me a sexy smile before turning to go into the bathroom. When she returned, I pretended to be already asleep. Nothing was happening. I started to plan my retribution. If the investigator came through as I hoped, I would have everything I needed. The next morning, I got a call from Sam while at work. The investigator had obtained video and still shots of Janice with Randy and Carla with Mark. Sam said the full report and copies of the footage would be ready by Wednesday. Seemed like Wednesday would be a big day. I felt sick again, but it wasn't from the flu this time. Sam also asked to meet with Bob and me to discuss our next steps. I told him I'd call Bob and get back to him. I called Bob at work and relayed the news about the investigators' findings and the meeting request. I could hear him crying on the other end, and it took a while for him to regain control. Finally, we decided to meet with Sam on Thursday morning after receiving the DNA results. I called Sam back and set the meeting for 9 a.m. During the week, Jen didn't offer any more intimacy, and I didn't feel like pushing her. On Thursday, Bob and I met Sam at his office. It looked like he had everything set up for a video presentation, with a TV near his desk. After a quick handshake, Sam motioned for us to sit in front of the TV. He explained that he would show the video without sound unless we wanted to listen. We agreed to watch the first viewing without sound. Sam started the video, and immediately the camera view appeared from above the bed. I saw a naked man I didn't recognize get onto the bed and lie on his back. He didn't seem any bigger than me, but the clarity of the picture suggested that the camera used was high-end. A moment later, a woman appeared in a black, short nightie, and I immediately recognized her as Janice. My stomach churned. I ran to Sam's bathroom and vomited up my breakfast. The sight of her wearing the same negligee she had worn during our intimate moment on Sunday evening hit me like a sledgehammer. Sam paused the video, but I could barely keep myself together. After I came back, Jen fell onto her back on the bed, and Randy mounted her in the missionary position. Sam suddenly cut the audio, and we could hear the sound of their heavy breathing fill the room. Jen's voice gasped, "I'm so glad we can do this once a year, Randy. If I didn't let my hair down at least once, I'd go stir crazy at home. I love my husband, but I don't think he'd respect me if I did the things I do with you." "I feel the same way, Jen," Randy gasped back. Sam stopped the video and said, "I thought you should hear that." He turned off the audio again. We continued watching as they worked through a few more orgasms, and then Sam put in another tape. This one showed Carla and her boyfriend going through pretty much the same scenario. When the video was finished, Sam turned off the TV and looked at us. "What's your pleasure, gentlemen? Do you want to proceed with a divorce?" We had already discussed it, and I said, "Yes, we want you to go ahead and prepare the papers, but hold off serving them until we tell you. We also want the full names and addresses of Randy and Mark. We want to send their wives copies of the report and video." "Okay, I'll get the paperwork started today." The investigator included the names and addresses, as well as the names of your wives' lovers, in his written report. "I'll give you copies before you leave, along with a copy of the video to do with as you please. Now, what about the paternity of your children?" I handed Sam the DNA report. "Sean is not my son, I'm sorry to say, but I'd like to find a way to adopt him. You need the father's permission to do that. I realize that, but can we get some leverage to force him to sign away his paternal rights to Sean? I was thinking about suing my wife's lover to collect child support for the 3 years since Sean was born. If he signs to allow me to adopt him, he wouldn't be liable for future child support. That could work, and you could also sue them for alienation of affection and use that as your bargaining tool," Sam suggested. "We'd like to proceed with those options," I confirmed. "Have you confronted your wives about any of this yet?" Sam asked. "No, we're planning to do that tonight over dinner." "All right, here are the copies of the report and video. I'll proceed as you've directed. I'm so sorry this happened." After leaving Sam's office, we went to an audio-video store to make extra copies of the video. While there, I picked up a wiretap recorder I would install that weekend. We then went to Kinko's to make additional copies of the report. We bought large shipping envelopes, addressed them to Randy and Mark's wives, and express shipped them overnight to their homes in Milwaukee, along with a brief handwritten note explaining who we were and how to contact us or Sam if needed. Back at the office, I explained to my boss that I would be taking a few days of vacation starting the next day to take care of things at home. My work was up to date, and my staff knew how to reach me, so he didn't have a problem with my request. Later that day, I called our credit card companies and canceled our joint cards, opening one in my name only. I also canceled Janice's cell phone. While checking Janice's AOL email account from my office computer, I found an email she'd sent to Randy on Monday morning saying she'd arrived home safely and was already looking forward to next year. There was no response from Randy. The rest of the day, I spent loading parts of the video and pictures from the report into my computer. I created a website to host everything, adding more details, times, and dates, as well as a copy of the DNA reports for me and the children. Once I was done, I hid the results under a secure file and left for the day. When I got home, Bob, Carla, and Melissa were already there. After fixing drinks for everyone, Bob and I went into the family room, leaving our wives in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Is everything ready?" Bob asked. "I just need to load one of the videos into the player, and we'll be good to go after dinner," I replied. I retrieved a copy of the video from my briefcase, loaded it into the DVD player, and then returned to my seat. I raised my glass to Bob, and he returned the salute. After a friendly family dinner, we adjourned to the family room, sending the kids to a bedroom to watch SpongeBob SquarePants. When we were all settled, I announced, "I have a video I'd like to show everyone." The wives looked at me, puzzled but expectant. "This isn't something dirty, is it?" Jen asked. "You promised you wouldn't bring any of that X-rated stuff into this house," she added. "No, honey, it's family stuff. It's educational and shows how a family can be destroyed," I said. She just nodded skeptically as I started the video. The video started with a shot of the bed in the center of the room, followed by an image of a naked Randy getting onto the bed. Jan hadn't recognized who the man was when "You told me this wasn't X-rated," she exploded. "I told you it was educational," I replied. Then Jan appeared on the screen. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" she screamed. "How did you get these?" She turned as white as a ghost as we watched her climb onto the bed, taking Randy in her mouth and bringing him to climax. Jan and Carla were both wailing and crying. "Turn it off! Turn it off! I don't want to watch!" Carla sobbed. "Don't worry, Carla. It's just started," Bob yelled at his wife. "We have a video of you too." Both of them were in shock, crying and sobbing uncontrollably. The kids came running to see what was going on, but we quickly ushered them back to the bedroom before they saw anything. Finally, Jen managed to gasp out, "Please turn it off, Jim. Please. We need to talk." I mercifully switched it off, leaving her sobbing, her tear-streaked face filled with shame. "Tell us, girls. Tell us why you betrayed us like this. We trusted you, and that trust is shattered. How do you plan to earn it back? You broke your wedding vows. How do you atone for that? I don't want to hear 'I'm sorry' or 'I can explain,'" I continued, my voice cold. "Nothing you say will ease the pain you've caused. We need to know how you plan to rebuild our trust, or this marriage is over. With these videos, we'll get custody of the kids, and you'll receive the minimum financial support from us. So, if you think this marriage is worth saving, tell us how you can regain our trust. Otherwise, we'll get a divorce." Jen looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I don't know. I don't know," she cried. "You're my love. I thought it was just an innocent fling once a year. No one would get hurt." I stared at her, my heart heavy. "I'm your love, am I? Would someone who truly loves their husband deliberately go out and get pregnant by another man? Tell me that, Jen." "Oh God!" she screamed, collapsing into another fit of sobs. Carla, still crying, glanced at her sister with a look of compassion. Bob, noticing the growing tension, spoke up. "I suggest you take Carla and Melissa home and work on your marriage. Jen and I have more to resolve than you do." Jen stayed on the sofa, curled up in a fetal position, sobbing uncontrollably. I escorted Bob and his family to the door, and as Carla turned to leave, her makeup running down her face, I couldn't bring myself to acknowledge her. Instead, I gave Bob a brotherly hug and said my goodbyes. Once the door closed, I herded the kids back to the bedroom. They were worried, sensing something was terribly wrong. I decided to take them to my parents for the night. The kids were eager to go. They loved spending time with their grandparents, who always spoiled them. I returned to the family room and told Jen, "I'm taking the kids to my folks for the night. I'll be back in about half an hour. You've got that time to figure out what you're going to do to atone for your infidelity. Whether you think this marriage and access to the kids is worth it." I paused for a moment, my voice steady but firm. "The only reason I'm even considering letting you stay is because of the kids. I haven't thought much about Sean yet. He's my son, and right now you're still the best candidate to be his mother. But as for the future, I'm not sure. I'll decide if I want a divorce. If you protest, I will make these videos, the DNA test results, and the investigator's report public. It'll go to your parents, your siblings, and the congregation at our church. You'll no longer have a life here." Jen didn't respond, her sobs growing louder. I quickly packed the kids' pajamas and toothbrushes and drove them to my parents' house. They were surprised to see us, but I explained that Jen and I needed some privacy. My dad gave me a knowing wink and said, "Take as long as you need, son. You don't look well, though. Are you all right?" "I'll be fine, Dad," I replied, forcing a smile. After leaving the kids with my parents, I returned home. The house was eerily quiet. I headed to our bedroom and found Jen packing her things, moving them to the guest room. She looked like she had aged years in the span of just a few hours, and her tears showed no sign of stopping. She looked at me, her voice trembling as she spoke. "This marriage, you and the kids, you mean more to me than anything in this world. I'm not going to apologize for what I did, and I won't try to explain it because you asked me not to. Why I allowed myself to get pregnant by him, I can't even explain that to myself." She paused, looking at me with a mixture of regret and fear. "I'll stay if you'll let me. I realize I have to move out of our marriage bed until you decide if you want me back. I won't withhold my body from you. You can have me anytime. I know you could get revenge on me by sleeping with someone else, and I can't stop you. It will hurt me as deeply as I've hurt you. But I'll do anything you want. Agree to any conditions, just to stay with you and the kids." Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I realize if you choose divorce, it's the end of me. I thank you for giving me a chance to redeem myself." "That was quite a speech, January," I said coldly. "Now shut up and listen. You might not realize it, but I've set conditions for you to stay here. And frankly, you may want to leave. But right now, I want revenge so badly I can taste it. Since I found out about the affair 10 days ago, I've been living in torment. But your torment, Jen, might last years. I hope you truly understand that." "I have thought about it, Jim," she replied, voice shaky. "I will give you my conditions tomorrow." I nodded and turned, heading downstairs. Later that night, alone in bed, I could hear her sobbing in the guest room. I wanted to go to her, comfort her, but every time I thought about what she had done, rage surged within me. I couldn't bring myself to offer her solace. She would have to atone for her actions. The next morning, I woke up early. After a quick shower, I dressed casually. It was Saturday and we had family coming over, but I needed to sit down and write out the conditions for our new marriage contract. Clear and final. I wanted to get her agreement when she woke up. I spent almost an hour in the kitchen, writing, crossing things out, and refining the list until I felt it was complete. At 10 o'clock, I went upstairs and woke Jen. "When you're cleaned up, join me downstairs in the kitchen," I told her. She nodded, and I left her to get ready. I soon heard the shower running, and half an hour later, she was sitting across from me at the kitchen table. I looked at her, taking a deep breath. "I've given this serious thought, Jen. I've tried not to let my need for revenge take over and make me do something I'll regret. I don't know if I still love you, but I honestly hope you'll stay the course so I can figure out if I do. I miss the wife I once had." She looked at me with a weak smile, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Oh, Jim, I still want to be your wife and put all of this behind us. But I know I have a lot to make up for." "Yes, you do," I replied firmly. "And here's what you need to do to make up for it." I began reading from the list I'd prepared. First, you will never be alone with another man again. That includes even simple things like being alone with the pizza delivery boy or the meter reader. Second, there will be no more solo trips anywhere. If your mother is dying and I can't go with you, you don't go. Third, you will notify me whenever you leave the house, where you're going, how long you'll be gone, and the purpose of the trip. You'll also let me know when you return. Fourth, I've already canceled your credit cards and phone. You won't have access to them anymore. She was listening quietly, tears still in her eyes. I continued. Fifth, you will make yourself available for sex at any time, 24/7. No exceptions. If I ask you to do something in bed, you will do it. If you could do it for Randy, you can do it for me. Do you understand? She nodded, a soft sob escaping her. Yes, I understand. I lost all respect for you, Jen, I said, my voice low. Was it worth it? No, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. What I did to you, I'm so sorry. Sixth, you will treat me with respect at all times. You will be a happy, obedient wife and mother. Seventh, you will report every time you talk to or communicate with a man. Whether it's over the phone, in a chat room, or by email, I will verify this, so you had better be honest with me. Eighth, you will sign adoption papers allowing me to adopt Sean if I choose to. Jen flinched slightly at the mention of Sean's adoption but said nothing. Ninth, I continued, you will limit communication with Carla to 1 hour per week. I don't know who influenced you to have the affair, but I'm certain it was her. Bob agrees, we have to keep you two apart. 10th, I'll give you a clothing allowance, but I have to approve anything new you buy. I won't have you spending money I work hard for to buy clothes for a lover. That's another sore spot for me. I paused, letting the weight of the conditions sink in. That's pretty much it. Do you have any comments or reservations? No, she replied, wiping her eyes. I accept them all. They're more lenient than I would have given you if our positions were reversed. Thank you, I said, trying to keep the anger in check. You should know, though, that your lover and Carla are not getting off scot-free. Copies of the investigator's report and the video CD have been sent to their wives as well. We'll be suing them for alienation of affection. And your friend will be sued for back child support and future support if he doesn't agree to the adoption. I think he'll sign the papers and agree never to try to contact Sean again until after his 21st birthday. Jen gasped, looking horrified. Oh my God, you'll destroy him. Besides, I said, you should have thought about the consequences before you got involved with him. Jen closed her eyes as the memory hit her. It was so easy, she whispered. We didn't think about getting caught. But I did. That night I had a bad dream. I dreamed about Jan and Randy. They were laughing at me while having sex. I woke up in a rage, drenched in sweat, my shirt clinging to my body. I must have made some noise, because Jan came running to my side, asking, Are you all right? Still consumed by my anger, I grumbled, Yes, I'm fine. Leave me alone. I'm sorry, she said softly, backing out of the room. The next morning, I showered and dressed for early church service. I knocked on Jan's door and said, "We leave for church in an hour." Then I went to get the kids ready. Everything was back to our usual routine. After church, we went to IHOP for breakfast, as we always did, then spent a lazy afternoon at home. I watched the football game, Jan worked on her crossword puzzle, and the kids played with their toys. The only thing out of the ordinary was when I went out to the garage during halftime and installed the wiretap recorder. From now on, I would have a way to monitor Jan when I wasn't home. The other abnormality came that afternoon when I received a call from Ree's wife. "Jim, I just wanted to thank you for the package you sent. It was incredibly enlightening. I'm using it in divorce proceedings against my husband," she said. "Is once-a-year infidelity enough grounds for divorce?" I asked. "It hasn't just been once a year," she replied. "Ree's been cheating for years. Now I have the proof to leave him and make him pay." "Thank you. Can you do something for me in return?" she asked. "Sure. Name it." "I need a DNA sample from your husband," she said. "I have a paternity issue, and whatever you send will have to be identified or certified as coming from your husband." "Consider it done," I said. "Give me a couple of days." "Thanks a lot, Jim. You should know that Mark's wife is also filing for divorce. He's been cheating just like Ree." I hadn't heard that, but I thanked her for the information and we signed off. I went to find Jan and found her in the family room with the kids. She looked up at me, knowing she shouldn't ask, but I decided to tell her anyway to cause her more pain. "Randy's wife is divorcing him," I said. "Mark's wife is divorcing him, too. It seems they were quite the philanderers, and the material I sent them gave their wives the proof they needed to leave them. It's going to be expensive for them. They'll be working the rest of their lives to pay for their mistakes, and their lawyers. And with my paternity suit against Randy, he's really in trouble." Jan turned pale and lowered her head. "I see," she said softly. "I didn't think it would affect so many people." I stayed quiet, letting the weight of my words sink in. Jan suddenly jumped up and ran from the room, sobbing. Later, she returned, looking exhausted. "I'm sorry for running off like that," she said. I felt overwhelmed. I never intended to break up 2 marriages and maybe a third. It wasn't because of any feelings for Randy. I simply nodded. I didn't feel the need to say anything more, and so began a long period of atonement. To monitor Jan more thoroughly, I bought an audio recorder that could pick up signals from tiny transmitters I could easily hide. I set up a recorder in the garage along with a phone tape recorder and hid transmitters throughout the house, places where visitors might unknowingly activate them. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to keep track of her movements. The days dragged on, and I could see the toll it was taking on January. The pressure to obey my conditions was wearing her down. She looked more haggard each day, a shadow of the woman she once was. It was hard on me, too. My boss and secretary suggested I see a doctor. They thought I had walking pneumonia, but I knew what the real problem was. It was a sickness of the mind. Our sex life had become nothing more than a release of aggression. There was no love in it. Jan responded to my demands, sometimes without complaint, sometimes with visible pain. But it didn't matter. I kept checking the recording devices every night when I came home from work, but it was clear she wasn't communicating with anyone. Jan had been following my conditions faithfully, calling me every time she left the house, reporting her movements just as I had required. But the toll of living under such strict constraints was starting to take its toll on both of us. I hadn't realized how suffocating the situation had become, and how loveless our marriage had turned. I began to see we needed a change. By the end of the first 30 days, the stress was unbearable. We were both struggling to live together, and even the kids noticed the strain. They became unnaturally quiet and nervous, watching us with worried expressions. Felt like their world was about to fall apart, and unfortunately, they were right. Watching them and Jan suffer was breaking me. My conditions and thirst for revenge were destroying the very marriage and family I had once tried to save. Finally, one Sunday afternoon, while the kids played outside, I took Jan by the hand and led her into the family room. "We need to talk." She looked at me with apprehension as I pulled her down onto the sofa beside me. I handed her the manila envelope. She stared at it blankly for a moment before breaking down in tears. "I love you, Jan, but I can't keep going on like this," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "I'm watching you die a little every day, and I've realized that I can't live like this anymore. The kids are hurting too. They feel it. They know something's wrong." I paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I've thought about this for the last few days. For a long time I felt empty. I think I don't love you anymore. I've tried to hold it together for the kids, but it's becoming clear that a split is coming. I can't forgive you for your affair, and especially not for Sean not being my son." I saw Jan's face fall, her eyes brimming with tears. "I want you to know that I may never be able to forget what you did, but I can try to forgive you. When I made that decision to forgive you, I felt better about myself. I think it was because I was finally thinking about my own self-preservation. I know that might sound selfish, but I hope it makes sense." Jan looked at me, her voice trembling. "I think I understand. It's been hard for both of us. I love you so much, and I wanted us to be together again. But I guess it is what it is, and now I have to live with it." The next morning, Jan left the house. Explaining things to the kids was difficult. "Mommy and Daddy need some time apart," I said, trying to keep things as simple as possible. But explaining it to our families was much harder. There was a lot of heat from both sides, especially from Jan's family. Somehow, though, we managed. Randy, after his divorce, moved into a condo. He'll be paying his ex-wife for the rest of his life since she has no intention of remarrying. Carla and Bob are still together, but their marriage is completely loveless. Every time I visit their house, I can feel the tension between them. It's like a ticking time bomb. After a lot of discussion, Bob decided to try marriage counseling with Carla, though I'm not sure it will help. It's something I never considered for myself. As for me, I adopted Sean as my son. I couldn't bring myself to ask him not to call me Dad. He had been my son since the day he was born, and I never told him otherwise. I was officially divorced 5 months later, and as per the settlement, I didn't give Jan anything. She never asked for anything, but I did give her visitation rights. A year later, Jan started dating, and 5 years after that, she remarried. I was invited to the wedding, but I didn't go. I let the kids attend, though. I never remarried or dated again. For me, the experience was enough. I couldn't bear the thought of going through it all again. You can call me a coward if you want, but for me, it's better to stay single and love my kids than to risk losing everything again. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.